Nobody saw it coming, and yet within hours, the entire internet was spiraling, trying to make sense of a story that felt too chaotic, too layered, and too dark to be just another headline. It started with a single shocking moment. Offset rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound. At first, the details were unclear. Confusion spread faster than facts. But before any official explanation could settle in, a chilling narrative began to take over social media, one that pulled Cardi B and Stefon Diggs straight into the center of the storm. And that's when things stopped feeling random. Because almost immediately, people online began to question the surface-level explanation. This wasn't just a casino fight that went too far. At least, that's not what fans believed. Instead, they started connecting dots, old posts, deleted tweets, resurfaced videos, and alleged messages that had once been ignored. Suddenly, the story felt bigger, darker, more intentional. What if this moment hadn't come out of nowhere? What if it had been building quietly, piece by piece, for months? Before the shooting, there were already whispers, subtle at first, easy to dismiss, but they were there. People close to the situation, or claiming to be, hinted that Offset wasn't just dealing with a breakup. He was unraveling, emotionally unstable, struggling behind the scenes in ways the public couldn't fully see. And one name kept coming up in those conversations: Stefon Diggs. At first, it didn't mean much, just speculation, just internet noise. But then everything started to shift. Because right after the shooting, old clips resurfaced. Alleged recordings began circulating. Accusations, some vague, some disturbingly specific, spread across platforms. And suddenly, one question started echoing everywhere. Did Cardi B already try to warn people? Some fans became convinced that she had been hinting at something for months. Not directly, not openly, but through cryptic comments, subtle posts, and moments that, at the time, didn't seem important. Now, in hindsight, those same moments felt different, heavier. Like clues, like warnings. And if even a small part of that interpretation was true, then this wasn't just drama anymore. This was something much deeper, something tied to emotion, ego, betrayal, and possibly revenge. To understand how things reached this point, you have to go back to before the chaos, before the rumors exploded, before the internet turned into a full-time investigation machine. You have to go back to Cardi B and Offset. On the surface, they looked unstoppable. A power couple with global fame, massive success, and a family that seemed solid whenever the cameras were on. They had everything: money, influence, attention. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. And those cracks weren't small. Their relationship had always been intense, filled with highs and lows that played out publicly. Cheating rumors, emotional breakdowns, dramatic reconciliations, each phase unfolded in front of millions. Every apology, every argument, every moment of tension became content. Fans watched it all. And each time it seemed like things couldn't get worse, somehow they kept going. Until they didn't. When Cardi B finally made it clear she was done, it felt different this time. Final, cold, irreversible. There was no sense of they'll work it out again. This time it looked like the end. And for the first time, Offset didn't seem in control of the situation. That's when everything started to change. Because while Cardi moved forward, Offset didn't. Not emotionally, not mentally, not publicly. And then came the moment that pushed everything into a new level of tension. Stefon Diggs entered the picture. At first, it was just rumors, a few sightings, a few coincidences that people weren't sure how to interpret. But then those rumors turned into something real, something visible. They were seen together more often, photographed together, spotted at events, games, and private outings that quickly became public. And just like that, what started as speculation became a headline. Cardi B and Stefon Diggs weren't just a rumor anymore. They were a reality. And that's when the tension truly began to build. Because every time a new photo surfaced, every time a video went viral, every time fans reacted online, there was one person at the center of it all, watching everything unfold. Offset. At first, his reactions were subtle, cryptic captions, vague posts, messages that didn't fully make sense unless you looked deeper. Fans brushed it off as heartbreak, just another celebrity dealing with emotions in public. But then the tone changed. The posts became darker, more aggressive, more personal, and suddenly people weren't laughing anymore. They were concerned. One particular deleted message started making rounds, a message that many now believe hinted at something serious, something beyond emotion, something that suggested consequences. Retaliation. That's when the narrative shifted again. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about pride, about ego, about watching your life, your marriage, your image, your family, fall apart in front of millions while someone else stepped into your place. And that someone was Stefon Diggs. Meanwhile, Cardi's new relationship didn't slow down. It accelerated. Fast. Too fast, some people said. Within months, it didn't just look like a rebound, it looked serious, intentional, like something that wasn't going anywhere. Public appearances became more frequent. Moments became more intimate. And the internet did what it always does. It chose sides. Some supported Cardi, saying she deserved happiness after everything she went through. Others weren't convinced. They questioned the timing, the overlap, the intensity. And most importantly, they questioned Offset's reaction. Because behind the headlines, behind the smiling photos and viral clips, there was a growing feeling that something wasn't right. That this situation wasn't just messy. It was building towards something. Something unpredictable. Something dangerous. Then came the leaks. And that's when everything took a darker turn. Alleged messages started surfacing. Conversations. Claims from people who said they had interacted with Offset during this period. Some sounded exaggerated. Others felt too detailed to ignore. And one name kept appearing in those stories. Selena Powell. Known for controversy, she didn't stay quiet. When she spoke, she painted a picture of Offset that was very different from what fans were used to seeing. Not just emotional, but unstable. Not just hurt, but unpredictable. Not just reacting, but possibly planning. That's when people really started connecting the dots. Those old tweets didn't seem random anymore. Those deleted posts didn't seem emotional anymore. They looked intentional, like warnings. And as everything unfolded in real time, one question became impossible to ignore. Was this always heading toward violence? Because while the internet debated and speculated, real life kept moving forward. And tensions weren't cooling down. They were rising, faster than anyone realized. Until one night, outside a Florida casino, everything exploded. It started like any other night. Lights, noise, movement. Offset stood in the valet area, surrounded by the usual chaos of a busy evening. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but witnesses later said there was tension in the air. Subtle, but real. A conversation that didn't look friendly. Body language that felt off. Then it escalated. Voices got louder. Movements became sharper. And before anyone could fully process what was happening, it turned physical. A fight broke out. At that moment, no one expected what would come next. Celebrity arguments weren't new. People assumed security would step in, break it up, and everything would calm down. But then, A gunshot. One single moment that changed everything. Chaos followed instantly. People screamed. Cameras shook. Security rushed in. Phones were already recording. And in the middle of it all, Offset was down. The same man at the center of weeks, months, of tension was now lying injured as everything spiraled out of control around him. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Videos surfaced almost instantly. Blurry clips, different angles, people pointing, yelling, trying to piece together what had just happened. And in one of the most viral pieces of footage, Offset is seen moments before the shooting, already in a heated confrontation with another individual. That's when the story took its first major turn. Because online, people quickly began identifying the other person. One name started spreading faster than anything else. Lil TJ. And just like that, the narrative formed. Clear, direct, explosive. Lil TJ shot Offset. But even then, despite how quickly that version of events spread, questions remained. Because in a situation this complex, this emotional, and this public, nothing is ever that simple. And the deeper people looked, the more uncertain everything became. What really happened that night? Was it a random escalation? Or the final moment in a story that had been building for months? That's the question the internet is still trying to answer. And the truth might be far more complicated than anyone expects. The moment the news broke, it felt like everything had finally reached a breaking point. What started as whispers of tension and online drama suddenly turned into something real, something violent. A rapper had been shot and the internet reacted exactly how you'd expect, fast, loud, and confident. Within minutes, a narrative formed. People believed they already knew what had happened. A fight, a rivalry, a moment that escalated too far. To many, it looked like a classic case of industry conflict turning physical. Another example of how personal issues in the spotlight can spiral out of control behind the scenes. The story spread like wildfire, and one name quickly became central to the narrative: Lil TJ. According to early reports and viral clips, he had been involved in the confrontation. For the internet, that was enough. The conclusion came quickly and forcefully. He must have been the one who pulled the trigger. But then something unexpected happened. The official reports started coming out. And they didn't match the story people had already accepted as truth. Yes, Lil TJ had been detained. Yes, he was present at the scene. But beyond that, the details told a very different story. There were no charges related to a shooting, no attempted murder, no firearm possession charges, nothing that directly tied him to the act that had shocked everyone. Instead, the only charges mentioned were minor, linked to disorderly conduct. And just like that, the entire narrative collapsed. Because if he didn't do it, then who did? That question shifted everything. What once felt like a clear, simple explanation now became complicated and a lot more unsettling. People weren't just confused anymore. They were uneasy. Because now the focus wasn't just on what happened in that parking lot. It shifted to something deeper, the timeline. And when people started digging into that timeline, things didn't sit right. Old clips resurfaced again, alleged recordings, leaked conversations. Moments that had once been brushed off suddenly felt significant. In those clips, Offset didn't just sound emotional, he sounded angry, in some cases aggressive, in others almost dangerous. One particular recording began circulating widely. In it, a voice, allegedly Offset's, could be heard making statements that immediately made people uncomfortable. These weren't vague emotional outbursts. They sounded like threats, specific ones. Even though no names were clearly mentioned, context changed everything. Listeners quickly connected those words to one person, Stefon. And just like that, the narrative shifted again. Before, people were asking, did someone try to harm Offset? Now a darker question emerged. Was Offset already planning something before all of this happened? That single question changed the tone of the entire conversation. Because now this wasn't just about a shooting. It became about motive, about intent, about whether the violence that happened that night was random or part of something that had been building quietly for months. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, another layer was added. More leaks surfaced, more claims, more individuals came forward with stories about Offset's behavior leading up to that night. Some described him as unstable. Others said he was under immense pressure, emotionally, mentally, even financially. Then came the gambling rumors. Unverified but impossible to ignore. Stories began circulating about large debts, heated arguments over money, and situations that may have pushed tensions even higher. These claims weren't confirmed, but they added fuel to an already raging fire. And suddenly, a completely different theory began to spread. What if this had nothing to do with Stefon Diggs at all? What if the shooting was tied to something far more immediate? A debt, a confrontation, a situation that spiraled out of control in real time. That idea gained traction quickly. But not everyone was ready to let go of the bigger narrative. Another group of people continued connecting everything: the relationship drama, the public humiliation, the emotional spiral, the alleged threats. They built a theory that felt almost cinematic. What if this wasn't random? What if this was the result of everything that had been building for months? Some even framed it as karma, a controversial idea, but one that spread quickly online. The suggestion was simple. The same energy Offset had allegedly been putting out had come back to him. And just like that, the internet split in two. One side focused on facts, official reports, confirmed details, and what could actually be proven. The other focused on patterns, behavior, timing, emotions, and everything that couldn't be easily verified but felt too connected to ignore. Right in the middle of all of it, there was one thing that stood out more than anything else: silence. While the world debated, analyzed, and accused, Cardi B said nothing. No posts, no reactions, no statements. And that silence made everything louder. Because now, people weren't just asking what happened that night. They were asking what she knew, and whether everything leading up to the shooting had been pointing toward this moment all along. But the story didn't slow down. If anything, it accelerated. Overnight, what started as a single incident turned into a full-blown internet investigation. Every clip, every tweet, every deleted message, everything began resurfacing at once. And the most unsettling part: the timeline started lining up. At first, it was just a few viral posts, fans digging through old screenshots, reposting clips that had long been forgotten. But now, those same clips felt different. They felt like warnings. People began revisiting everything Cardi B had said over the past few months. Old tweets started circulating again, posts where she talked about feeling threatened, harassed, even scared. At the time, most people didn't take those statements seriously. They were dismissed as emotional reactions, just another celebrity venting online. But now the perspective had changed. Now people were asking, what if she wasn't exaggerating? What if she was actually trying to warn people? That question alone was enough to push social media into chaos. Then came the threads. Long, detailed breakdowns, thousands of likes, millions of views. One viral thread started with a simple statement: Offset gets shot. But then it went deeper. It referenced the alleged recordings, the threats, the gambling rumors, the emotional instability, and the relationship drama involving Stefon Diggs. And then it asked the question that made everyone pause. What if Cardi B already exposed everything and nobody listened? That idea spread fast, because now the focus wasn't just on the shooting itself. It was on everything that led up to it. And suddenly, people weren't just watching the story. They were invested in it. But then came the most shocking development yet. In the middle of all the speculation, one specific piece of content resurfaced, a clip that changed the entire tone of the conversation. It was an alleged recording. In it, a voice, again believed by many to be Offset, was heard making threats. Not vague anger, not emotional frustration, but detailed, specific statements about what he would do if he encountered a certain person. No name was mentioned directly, but the internet didn't hesitate. They connected it straight to Stefon Diggs. And once that clip went viral, everything shifted again. People stopped asking whether someone had targeted Offset. Instead, they started asking whether Offset had set something in motion himself. That shift changed everything. Because now, the story wasn't just about a victim. It became a story about actions, about consequences, about whether everything that happened that night was part of a larger chain reaction. And then came the reactions from within the industry. Subtle at first. A few likes, a few reposts, small acknowledgments that something serious had happened. But no one said much. No one stepped forward to fully explain. No one rushed to defend. And that silence, from people who usually speak quickly and loudly, felt significant. Because in a situation like this, clarity matters. And there wasn't any. The lack of answers made everything feel more real, more dangerous, more unresolved. And that's where things still stand. A shooting, multiple narratives, conflicting theories, and a timeline that raises more questions than it answers. What really happened that night? Was it random? Was it personal? Or was it the final moment in a story that had been building for months? Right now, nobody can say for sure. And until those answers come out, the speculation isn't going anywhere. And that's exactly why the story refuses to fade. Because when there are no clear answers, people don't move on, they dig deeper. What followed next wasn't just discussion, it became obsession. Online communities turned into investigation hubs overnight. Every second of footage from that night was slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. People weren't just watching anymore, they were searching, looking for anything that had been missed. A shadow, a movement, a detail that didn't line up. Some claimed they saw a second individual in the background of one clip. Others pointed out what they believed was security reacting too late, or in a way that suggested they already knew something was wrong. None of it was confirmed, but that didn't stop it from spreading. Because at this point, the internet wasn't operating on certainty. It was running on possibility. And possibility is powerful. At the same time, more alleged witnesses began speaking out. Not officially, not through reports, but through anonymous posts, comments, and messages that quickly went viral. Each one added a new version of events. Some said the argument started over something small, disrespect, a look, a comment taken the wrong way. Others insisted it was deeper, that the tension had been building long before that night, that what happened in that parking lot wasn't the beginning, it was the release. Then came another twist. Questions about security. People started asking, how does something like this happen in a high-profile location, with cameras everywhere, with security present, with celebrities involved? Was it a failure? Or was it something that escalated too quickly for anyone to stop? Again, no clear answers. Just more questions. And while all of this was happening, something else stood out, Offset himself. Because after the initial reports, after the chaos, after the viral explosion, there was very little direct communication. Updates were limited, statements were controlled, and that created another layer of mystery. People wanted to hear from him. They wanted clarity. But instead they got silence, or at least something close to it. And in situations like this, silence doesn't calm things down. It amplifies everything. Meanwhile, the conversation around Cardi B only grew louder. Her past statements were still circulating. Her old posts were still being analyzed. And the lack of any current response kept people questioning. Was she staying quiet intentionally? Was she avoiding making things worse? Or did she know something that hadn't been revealed yet? No one could say for sure, but that didn't stop people from forming their own conclusions. Then there was Stefon Diggs. Interestingly, his name, despite being at the center of so many theories, remained distant from any confirmed details about that night. No official connection to the incident, no verified involvement. And yet online, he was still part of the narrative. Not because of facts, but because of context. Because of everything that had happened before. That's what made this situation so complicated. There were two separate stories unfolding at the same time. One based on confirmed information, reports, charges, verified timelines. The other built on interpretation, emotions, patterns, and everything people believed connected the dots. And those two stories didn't match. Not cleanly, not comfortably. As days passed, more footage surfaced, but none of it provided a definitive answer. No clear shooter, no undeniable moment that explained everything, just fragments. Pieces of a puzzle that refused to come together. And that's when a new realization started to settle in. Maybe the truth wasn't going to be simple. Maybe this wasn't a situation where one person was entirely right and another was entirely wrong. Maybe it was a collision of multiple factors, emotion, pressure, timing, environment, all coming together in the worst possible way. But even that idea didn't satisfy people. Because humans don't like uncertainty. They want conclusions. They want someone to blame. They want a clear story they can understand. And without that, the speculation continues. Even now, the same questions keep resurfacing. If Lil TJ wasn't responsible, then who was? If the confrontation was already heated, what pushed it over the edge? Were the threats real or taken out of context? Was this personal or just a moment that spiraled too far? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, could this have been prevented? Because when you look back at everything, the tension, the public drama, the emotional signals, the alleged warnings, it's hard not to wonder whether the signs were always there. Whether this moment, in some way, was predictable. Not inevitable, but possible. And that's what makes it stick. This isn't just a story about one night. It's a story about everything leading up to it. Every post, every rumor, every reaction, every moment that seemed small at the time, but now feels significant. Until more concrete information comes out, the story remains unfinished. Not because people don't know what happened, but because there are too many versions of what might have happened. And in the absence of truth, narratives take over. Some logical, some emotional, some completely disconnected from reality. But all of them feeding into the same thing. A story that refuses to settle. A moment that refuses to be fully understood. And a question that still lingers over everything. What really happened that night? Until that question is answered with certainty, this won't just be remembered as an incident. It will remain a mystery. What made everything even more unsettling was the realization that this moment, the shooting, the chaos, the confusion, might not have been as random as it first seemed. Because as people started looking back, really looking back, it began to feel like everything leading up to that night was slowly pointing in this direction. At first, that idea sounded extreme, but then more information started surfacing. And suddenly, it didn't feel so impossible anymore. Because what came next didn't just add another layer to the story, it changed the way people understood the entire situation. Almost overnight, this stopped being just a headline about a rapper getting shot outside a casino. It turned into something much bigger, a full-scale internet investigation. Everywhere you looked, people were digging. Every clip was being reposted. Every old tweet was being analyzed. Every deleted message was being recovered and shared again. Rumors that had once been ignored were suddenly being treated like evidence. And the most unsettling part, the timeline started lining up almost too perfectly. At first it was small, just a few viral posts, a couple of screenshots, fans going back through old content, reposting things that hadn't seemed important before. Moments that had been overlooked. Details that didn't stand out at the time. But now, those same moments felt different. Heavier, like they meant something. Like they were warning signs people had missed. That's when attention shifted toward Cardi B. People started revisiting everything she had said over the past few months, not casually, but carefully, breaking down her words, her tone, the timing of her posts. And what they found made the situation feel darker. Much darker. Old tweets began circulating again. Posts where she talked about feeling threatened, about being harassed, about feeling unsafe, sometimes even scared. At the time, most people hadn't taken those statements seriously. They were dismissed as emotional reactions. Another celebrity expressing frustration online. Nothing unusual. But now, in light of everything that had happened, those same words were being viewed through a completely different lens. Now people were asking, what if she wasn't exaggerating? What if she was actually trying to warn people? That single question was enough to send social media into chaos. Because if those posts weren't just emotional, if they were genuine, then it meant this situation had been more serious than anyone realized. And maybe, just maybe, the signs had been there all along. Then came the threads. Long, detailed breakdowns started appearing across platforms. Some were carefully organized, almost like investigative reports. Others were messy but compelling, filled with screenshots, timelines, and theories. One thread in particular went viral. It started simple. Offset gets shot, but look at this. From there, it went deeper. It connected everything. The alleged recordings, the threatening messages, the gambling rumors, the emotional breakdowns, and the relationship drama involving Stefon. It laid everything out step by step, building a narrative that felt almost impossible to ignore. And then it dropped the line that made people stop scrolling. What if Cardi B already exposed what was going on, and nobody listened? That idea spread fast. Because it didn't just focus on the shooting. It reframed the entire story. Now, it wasn't just about what happened that night. It was about everything that led up to it. And suddenly, people weren't just watching from a distance. They were emotionally invested. They wanted answers. They wanted clarity. But instead, they got something else. Another twist. Right in the middle of all the speculation, one specific piece of content resurfaced, and it changed everything again. It was a clip, an alleged recording, a moment that had existed before but had been ignored. Now it was everywhere. In the recording, a voice, believed by many to be Offset, could be heard making threats. Not vague expressions of anger, not emotional outbursts, but detailed, specific statements about what he would do if he encountered a certain person. There was no name mentioned clearly. But that didn't matter. The internet filled in the blanks almost instantly. People connected it directly to Stefon Diggs. And once that connection was made, the narrative shifted again. Before, the focus had been on one question. Did someone try to harm Offset? Now, a much darker question took its place. Was Offset the one who set everything in motion? That shift changed the entire energy of the conversation. Because now, this wasn't just a story about a victim. It became a story about actions, about consequences, about whether everything that happened that night was part of a larger chain reaction that had been building for months. And once that idea took hold, it spread quickly. People started reinterpreting everything through that lens. The posts, the behavior, the alleged threats. It all started to feel connected, even if there was no solid proof tying it all together. Then came the reactions from within the industry. They were subtle at first. A like here, a repost there, small acknowledgments that something serious had happened. But what stood out wasn't what people said. It was what they didn't say. No one stepped forward with a clear explanation. No one rushed to defend or clarify. No one publicly shut down the rumors. And that silence felt loud. Because in situations like this, people usually speak. They react. They respond. But here there was hesitation. And that hesitation made everything feel even more real, more dangerous, more unresolved. At the same time, fans noticed something else. Something that didn't sit right. Cardi B was still completely silent. No tweets. No Instagram stories. No interviews. Nothing. For someone known for speaking openly, for reacting quickly, for addressing things directly, that silence felt unusual. Intentional. Almost calculated. It felt like she was watching everything unfold, but choosing not to step in publicly. And that raised even more questions. Did she know more than she was saying? Was she trying to protect herself? Or was she waiting for something else to come out? Because, behind the scenes, the rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they were growing. People began claiming that more information existed. More recordings, more messages, more details that hadn't been released yet. Unverified, of course, but still enough to keep people hooked. And that possibility, that there was more still hidden, kept everyone glued to their screens. Refreshing timelines, checking for updates, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to drop. Because at this point, the story wasn't just about facts anymore. It was about anticipation. People weren't just reacting to what had already happened. They were waiting for what might happen next. And just when it felt like things couldn't get more intense, like every angle had been explored, like every theory had been discussed, there was this lingering feeling that something bigger was still coming. Because in a situation this layered, this emotional and this public, stories don't just end. They evolve. And whatever came next, whatever truth, detail, or revelation was still out there, had the potential to change everything all over again.